Hi guys. Uh, One second. Oh, great. So, yeah, I guess I'm broadcasting live now. Uh, yeah. So, good morning. So, I'll be giving some general tips and tricks on how to go about to prepare for a coding interview, how you can improve yourself, and some general questions that people normally have, kind of like an FAQ. And towards the end, I'll be taking questions from everyone. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Right. So let's start with the session now. So yeah. So yeah, this is the session agenda. As I said, we'll start with general doubts, then how you can improve your code. I'll be sharing some examples as well. We'll be going through a couple of questions and seeing how you can improve your code in an interview. Then there were also requests for some specific company related processes. So I will dive into that a little very briefly, and then we'll have a Q&A session. Uh, yeah. So these are the general doubts that usually people have. So first, what is the process? So when you are sitting for an interview for any technical company, whether it be for your internship or for your campus placements, um, you will go through an online test. Some companies have just one online test. Some have two. The first one in that case would be an MCQ, and the second a coding test. However, most companies they combine it into one single test. That's an MCQ and a coding test. So that will be a first round, and then shortlisted candidates are then called for interviews. And usually, some companies have a group discussion. Now, the group discussion is not exactly a group discussion. It will be something like everyone is put into a room, everyone is given one common question. You have 1 hour, solve the question, and just write the code and show your answer. Call anyone and show your answer. And usually, this is followed by an interview. Um yeah, and some companies also have an HR interview towards the end. Some don't, most do, but that is not like for that you just need to answer in a general way. You shouldn't worry too much about that. I'll get into that later. Next, a lot of people ask how to start the preparation and when to start. So this answer will vary from person to person. It depends on how strong your concepts are. So I wouldn't recommend directly jumping into question archives if your basic concepts are not strong. I would say that when you are starting your preparation, you should spend a couple of days on revising your basic concepts. Revise your basic concepts such as just general arrays, memory allocations, pointers, recursion, basics of loops, just general stuff. Spend a couple of days doing simple questions and code it. What that will help you do is, usually people when they're starting their preparation, they are out of touch with such processes. So this will give you an advantage wherein you know that your hand is set in coding. So whenever something comes up or some tough concepts come up and you come up with a solution in your head, it will not be hard to start coding, because that also happens. You know the logic, but if you are out of touch with coding, you cannot start coding, right? So that is one thing I would recommend. Then you start off topic by topic. You first pick up basic array questions. You see your searching algorithms. You have a look at linked lists, and then you move on to trees and graphs. And basically for after so what you should do is you should revise the basic concepts, uh, then just close everything, have a run through in your head, and then try coding it, because that will really help you. Coding is a must. And once you're done with this basics, then you look for questions on archives, or let's say Geeks for Geeks archives, or you can go to CodeChef or HackerRank or any platform and search for questions based on the topic, and then you can code it. Because eventually what will matter is whether your concept is strong enough and whether using this concept you can code questions, right? So that is it. Then what all topics to cover, how much time to spend? Again, this will vary from person to person. It depends on how much you are willing to invest, how much time you're willing to invest. Topics, so as I said, for the time to spend, you should start with the basics, and you should divide your time in such a way that you're comfortable with one topic, and then you move on to the other. If you are still uncomfortable after spending a lot of time, I would not say just stick to that. I would say move on, because you only have limited time. But keep doing that in parallel. Maybe one question a day will definitely help you improve. What topics to cover? So, in general, you should revise your DS and OOP concepts thoroughly, and then you should practice. So, a lot of the times in the technical interviews, um, you are just asked simple array questions where you need to use logic and improve the time efficiency. So, I would say look for questions which have multiple solutions to cover these basic questions. So what that will do is that will train your mind to think in different ways. And once you do that, it will help you to come up with different solutions on the spot, because the interviewer is never going to be happy with the first solution that you present to them. So I would advise you to look for questions that have multiple solutions. Then you can revise your linked lists, graphs, trees, stacks and queues, basic or the basic algorithms, and at least one to two questions that use those algorithms as a part of solving the question. So just revising those concepts and coding them is not enough, because that is no one is going to ask you, hey, okay, can you write Dijkstra's algorithm for yeah, so no one is going to ask you that. People are going to give you questions wherein you will have to code this as one component that will help solve that question. So, which is why doing those questions is very important. Just covering the concept is not enough. Yeah. So this I missed this point of early internships. So someone had also asked how to apply for internships in earlier years. Like if you're in your first or second year, you've just finished that and you want to do a summer internship. Um, for this, I mean, the best way is to reach out to programs in college. For example, I was a part of this FOSSI group, and so wherein we were working with IIT Bombay, and afterwards I got an internship over there. And one more thing, I applied for this organization from ISLA also. I had applied for an internship. So your college groups will have a lot of such stuff. You just need to be aware and grab opportunities as soon as they come. Like, don't be lazy. Oh, hey, this is nice. I'll look at it after 2 days. Just apply. You never know what works out. So that is the best way to go for early internships. Or if you have contacts, then that also works. Um, but yeah, moving on. Next, what to include in your resume? So some people had have doubts whether what is the most important aspect that interviewers look for in a resume. Is it my academic qualifications? Is it projects? Is it internships? So it is actually a sum total of all that. uh, just having one and lacking in others is not going to help you. Just having a high CGPA and not having any kind of projects or internships will not be too good. Yes, one or two companies do look for that, but I honestly don't think you should be aiming for those companies. Um, at the same time, having just projects and internships and having a CGPA of let's say 5 or 6 also would not work in your favor when you're going for campus placements, because you wouldn't even get shortlisted in the first place. So you have to have a right balance, maintain a decent academic record, uh, then have at least one internship and do at least one or two projects. The projects can be very simple, just whatever you do, whatever you like doing. Like, for example, this one time I wanted to simulate running a game on my phone, because it had it had something that had, like, you had to watch ads to get virtual coins, and I'm like, I'm not going to sit and waste my time watching ads. So I wrote a script that simulates watching those ads. So, certain things that you love doing, just write code and host it on GitHub, post it on GitHub as a project, and you can include those as links. You basically, the thing is, you have something to talk about with the interviewer about stuff that you have done, and that gives the interviewer some confidence that you have experience in working on projects. So that next, this different type of interviews is basically the technical interviews versus the HR interviews. So usually for all, actually, in the initial round you will have a technical interview. uh, then some companies have a managerial interview as well. So what that is, it's basically, it's a software development manager who's taking an interview. It will That will be a semi-technical and an HR based. So basically, in that, the manager, what they're trying to see is whether the person has decent enough technical skills to and a thinking in a way that matches what they want to do. So that is a managerial interview. And next is an HR interview. So an HR interview will just be to see whether you fit into the company culture, whether you have any issues working in the location, or any kind of problem. So in that, you should just be yourself, give diplomatic answers, and just see it through. That's what I feel. Um, yeah, next. So a lot of people have doubts about what if I don't know the answer to a particular question. So you are sitting in a technical interview. Someone has asked you to write code for a particular thing, and you're like, I don't even know how to approach this. So in some cases, in these cases are very happen very often. I mean, it is completely normal to be in such a situation, because initially you will be stumped. The best way is, so you have to be a little sly here, I would say. You have to buy time. So if you are not sure, you should first of all understand the question properly. You could ask the interviewer to explain the question once more, and you can ask the interviewer about, the edge cases, and to understand exactly what the question is, because then you'll be clear with the question. If you are not complete 100% clear with the question itself, you will not be clear with the solution. Because what happens is, if you already know the solution, the thing is that you already know the question as well. That is why when the interviewer is asking you a question and you know the solution, it's because you have tackled that kind of question before. So in such cases, it is very important to understand the question thoroughly, and it will also give you a chance to buy some time to think about solutions in your head while you're listening to the question. Next, if even after that you cannot think of anything, don't just give up. Ask the interviewer to give you 2 minutes. The interviewer is never going to say no. The interviewer is always going to say, sure, take your time, think of it, and he's going to sit back and relax. Now here, you should not be in your own zone, because the interviewer is actually watching you, right? So think aloud. Say, even if, like, you have the worst brute force solution, O of n power 4, O of n power 5, whatever, like you're using 5 loops, just say it out loud, because then the interviewer is going to get a chance to see how you think. It is okay to not give the correct solution. It is always obviously best to give the correct solution with complete code, but it is okay even if you don't give the entire solution, as long as the interviewer knows that you're thinking in the right way. So tell the interviewer the worst solution you have. Then say that, I don't think this is the right way to do it. So maybe if we do this, then it could work. Then the interviewer will pitch in with ideas. Are you sure? What if you do this? So that will actually give you hints as well. So converse with the interviewer, think aloud, and try to show the interviewer you're thinking, even if you can't come up with the answer. Next, so I will cover more about this aspect, and how to improve later in the session. I'll move on for now. So next, about Skype interviews. So in these, so sometimes you apply off campus and you have early rounds that happen over the phone or Skype. So now over here, it is slightly more tricky because you cannot see the interviewer's facial reaction most of the times. So you don't know whether you're going in the right direction or not. So I would say in these interviews, it is even more important to talk aloud, because when you are solving stuff on paper or you're thinking, interviewer is not going to do what is not going to know what you're doing. So you have to convince the interviewer about your thinking in general, and that's pretty much it. So in these interviews, they will share a link where you can go online and code as well later on. um, so that's there. Yeah. Moving on. Yes. So before I continue, does anyone have any questions they want to ask at this moment? uh, any questions? I'm not sure how to see the comments. Before I continue, does okay. So if you have any questions, you can just enter it in the chat, and I will have a look at it in between also. But mostly the Q&A session will happen at the end. So yeah, moving on. Now, how to improve your code? Um, so fine, you did your preparation. You know everything. You did your you went through books. You went through Geeks for Geeks. You know the concepts. You revised everything. Now what do I do? Right. Oh. Uh, yeah. Actually, let me just share my screen for the next part. Uh, yeah. I hope everyone can see my screen. Um, yeah. So improving your code. So the first part of, as I mentioned earlier, is to ask questions. So whenever an interviewer, starts giving a question, sometimes you're like halfway when the interviewer is done, you're like, oh, I know this question. But just listen to it, be patient, because usually these questions that you do know are the very general questions, and usually interviewers, they give it some twist or the other while asking it in interviews. So just be patient, listen to the question, and once done, ask questions. Be very clear in your head about what the boundaries are, what the exact problem statement is, who is the solution going to be for, what all corner cases you have to cover, what all inputs you do not, whether you have to validate inputs or not, whether you have to throw exceptions or not. Be very clear about this. Ask the interviewer all this so that you know exactly what is expected of you. Yeah, that will definitely fetch you a lot of brownie points, and it will also give you a clarity of thought while you are attending while you're attempting the question. Next, language selection and coding style. So language, you should always select a language that you are familiar with. um, so for example, if let's say you have to deal with, and also sometimes you can use languages that favor some some aspects. So for example, if you have to deal with very large numbers, I would use Python in that, because if I have to it's very easy for that. uh, Python deals with large numbers automatically. While I'm into an interview, I can use that. Otherwise, when I have to write, when I have to attempt a linked list question or any kind of arrays, I am very comfortable with C++ because that's the language I started coding in. I have coded in a lot of languages, but that's the language I'm most comfortable with. So I go for that because I know the syntax, and because I've practiced so much. The natural flow, it just comes along. So that is one more thing. It will just help you, and have a good coding style. um, Name your variables properly. Modularize your code. Give input validation checks, throw exceptions. It is not necessary, you will still get the logic across, but it will fetch you brownie points, and who doesn't want brownie points, right? And also, so the interviewer is mostly going to be someone who has been writing production code for at least a couple of years. And once you do that, that is all code you can write. It is very hard to go back to int I equal to 0, I less than 100, I plus plus. You will have loops with proper variables and everything. So if you use that kind of a convention that you use for production level coding or open source coding, it will give the interviewer confidence that this interviewee has experience, and they will be more comfortable with you. Next, modularize code. So wherever it is possible, modularize your code into functions, define classes, define structures, wherever necessary, and reuse that code. But at the same time, you should be sure to, not break down every individual component. Like, for example, if you just have to do a sum once, it is okay to not define a function for sum. That's just going overboard. So modularize code, use proper data structures. It will make your code look good. Write complete code. That's basically just do not assume that any part of the logic will be done for you by a predefined function. So for example, if in your runner function you have any kind of code, you're writing something, and then in that it's supposed to refer to another function that does some mathematical operation. Do not assume that that will be done by that. Write the complete code. Next, take care of edge cases. That goes without saying, because the interviewer is always going to have a few edge cases that he's going to test your code with. So before the interviewer even tests with those edge cases and points out a flaw in your code, it's better to um, work your code with those edge cases and point out the flaw yourself, and suggest how you can improve your code. So that is what this dry run also goes through. So whenever you're done writing your code, always pick up an example, pick up an example and run through your code. Show the interviewer the flow of the code with how exactly each variable will pass through, and do this with an edge case, because usually it's those that go wrong. And the interviewer will expect you to make a mistake on the first go. So and that happens in real life also. The first code that you write is never going to be right. There will always be some bugs in that. So that will also show your debugging skills. If you get it wrong and you do a dry run, you point out that this is a mistake, this is where it will fail, and this is what I think we can do to improve upon it. And this is how, and then you improve your code, you correct your errors, and then you do another dry run and show that the test case passes. So that will not only show that you write proper code, you test it thoroughly, you take care of edge cases, and you have good debugging ability. So all this will come out in the interview if you present it in such a way. And this last point is, as I've mentioned earlier, it's just you need to talk aloud. So there's that. Yeah. Moving on. Now I'll give some examples on how you can improve your code with some simple questions. So this is the first question. Um, just go through it. Yeah. So in this example, we will be like the input is an array of numbers and a certain sum, and we have to find three numbers that sum up to a certain sum. So so for example, you can see that this is the array over here. Oh, what just happened? Yeah. This is the array, and the expected sum is 4, and you need to see whether any three elements over here sum up to 4. So in this case, yes, three elements do, which is 2, 3, and -1. They sum up to 4. So now, when such a question is asked to you in an interviewer, sorry, in an interview, the most obvious and the most logical solution that you'll come up with is to do a brute force, right? Have three different loops, and in those three loops, you basically you go through each and every element, and you see if I, j, and k they sum up to the sum, and it's a very simple code, brute force, O of n cube, and you're done. But that is, the interviewer did not ask this question to see whether or not you can write a brute force code, whether or not you can write three loops, three nested loops or not. Um, that is obviously not the right answer. So now you have to find a way to improve this, to optimize this. So how do you do that? So whenever so some key tips, so this is actually something, an example on how you can improve your searching. So wherever you see find, right, wherever you have to find something, it means that you actually have to do some kind of searching. So in and right now when we are running three loops, we are only doing linear searching. So whenever you realize that there's some kind of searching to do, try and see if you can sort and apply binary search in any way. Many times it will work, many times it won't work, but just try and see if sorting is an option, and then you can apply binary search to improve your time complexity. So here we know that our brute force solution time complexity is O of n cube, but if we sort, that's only going to be O of n log n. So we can definitely sort. Our time complexity is not going to change. It's still going to be O of n cube, because sorting is something that's done earlier before we do anything, right? So our time complexity is still going to stay O of n cube even if we sort. But now that we have the array sorted, is there something that we can do with it, right? So I'll start giving an example. -1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 9. So this is our array: -1, 2, 3, 5, 7, and 9. And we need to see if any three numbers sum up to 4. 4 is very easy. It's the first three digits itself. Let's see if we can find something else. 5, 2. Yeah, I guess we can do sum 6. Let's keep the sum as 6 for this example. So now, you will obviously have to go through the loop once to go through each and every element. But now that you have this sorted, so let's say I take my first element as -1, and we want to see if any two numbers from this array, from this sub array, sum up to -1 plus 6, that is 5. So we want to see if this happens. So now we have broken down this task into another, we've broken down the question into another sub question. And now here is where the binary searching will come into place. I'm sorry if my handwriting is bad. I'm using this tablet for the first time. Yeah. So now we need to see if any two elements sum up to 5. So we can take the first and the last element, and then we see that their sum is 11. Now, if the sum is greater we obviously want a smaller number, right? We want smaller numbers. Now 2, there is nothing smaller than 2, right? So obviously we'll have to go smaller than 9. So we shift this by 1, we go to 7. We see 2 plus 7 is equal to 9, which is still greater than 5. So we shift this by one more. We come here, we see 2 plus 5 is equal to 7, which is greater than 5. Then we shift this by one more. We see 2 plus 3 is equal to 5. Yeah. So I'm sorry. Just give 1 second. I need to have a water. Yeah. So here, what concept did we use? That once we have this sorted, this is essentially a kind of binary search, right? You basically so over here, what I've done is I started with -1 because I already knew. But like in a general algorithm, what you would do is when you have the array. I'll just clear the screen 1 second. How do I clear it? Yeah. Just a second. Sorry. Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. So if you basically break down this problem into if you break down the question into this sub question, wherein you have to find two numbers that sum up to a certain number, you know that now this can be done in O of n square, and this is the logic that we can use. We can have a start element, and we can have an end element, and we can progressively see we can see that if let's say like 11 2 plus 9 11 was greater than 5, we can come down. If let's say we were looking for a sum of let's say 8, then after seeing here 7, what we would have done was we would have incremented this because we cannot get any lower than 5, but we need to get a greater number. So we come here and we would see 3 plus 5 is 8, and we would get that. So now that we have this and we know that when we have this sorted, we can do this in this way in O of n square. Now, this selection part, the first loop that we were running, instead of running it linearly, like going from -1 to 2 to 3 to 5 to 7 to 9, we can now have a binary search wherein we start off with 3, then we see that there is no way I can get a sum that oh, in this case we do. But let's say we start with 5. Let's say there was another element and we were starting with 5. And then we can see that there is no way that even the lowest numbers that I have, 5 minus 1 and 2, that's what that's oh, that's also 6. Anyway, sorry. So, sorry, my bad. I thought we were looking for 4. So if you're looking for 6, and let's say we start with 3, we go through all, we see that there is no way that the sum will ever reach 6. So then we move on and we see that then we go to the next element. We'll have to go to the right because 3 is obviously a smaller number and we want a bigger sum. So we go to 5 and then we'll see that we get the number. So this is one way. So essentially what I was trying to say is that whenever you see this find, we will just try to do a dry run in your mind to see if there is any way you can do a binary search after sorting the element, after sorting the entire list. Moving on. Improving. Yeah. So this is one more question. A similar question, but the solution will be different. So the question is that you are given an array, and you have to say if there are any two pairs of numbers that sum up to the same number. So for example, here 2 plus 4 is equal to 6, and 5 plus 1 is also equal to 6. So we do have, so 2, 4 is one pair, and 5 and 1 is one pair. So we know that there are two pairs that sum up to the same number. So we need to say whether this is possible in the given array or not. Now here also, the naive solution and the most obvious solution that will come to people's head is to have for loops, have an O of n to the power 4 solution. But that is again obviously not what we are going for here. So in places like this, so in things like this where you know, now over here, when you see this question, such a question, the first question that you should ask the interviewer is the range of numbers. And yeah, basically the range of numbers, because it gives you an idea of how you can use hashing in your interviews. So just a second, someone is, yeah, so this will give you an idea of how you can use hashing in your interviews. So in this problem, if we know the range, right, we can actually create a hash table of the range. Let's say the interviewer will say that the numbers are from, let's say, 1 to 100. Now if you have that range with you, what you can actually do is let me erase this. Wow, there's no way to, how do I erase the whole thing? Is there no way to clear the screen? Okay. Yeah. So yeah. So now if you have an array, so sorry, if you know that the size is only going to be 1 to 100, what you can actually do is, yeah, you can create a hash. Let's say sum is 0, 1, 2, so on up to 200. Because if the maximum element that can be in the array is 100, then you have then the sum can be a maximum of 200. Now what you will do is, when you have the array, what was the array? 2 4, I'll put 5 and 1 later. Right. So now what we can do is we can reduce this to an O of n square solution by just going through each and every element. Like this is our first counter and our second counter, then we iterate through in the first loop. So over here, so now we'll basically, what we're going to do is we're going to mark whether or not a sum has been visited. So in this case, like we start with the first two elements, 2 plus 4, that's the sum is 6. So in this table, wherever we have 6, we can mark it as visited. The others all will be initialize to 0, which is they haven't been visited yet. I'll create a new table here, let's say. So yeah, 6 is visited. Next, 2 plus 9, that is 11, will also be visited. Then 2 plus 10, 12 will also be visited. Then 2 plus 7, that is 9, will be visited. So you get the idea. I can't create a whole table here. Let's see if I can. So let's just assume that initially all of them are 0. So 6 will be visited, 11, 12, then 2 plus 7, 9 will be visited, 2 plus 5, that is 7, will be visited, 2 plus 3, 5 will get visited, 2 plus 0, 2 will get visited, 2 plus 1, 3 will get visited, then minus 2 also somewhere over here will get visited, then 2 plus 7, 9. Now when again, so let me just remove 7 for the purpose of this example so that we don't have anything. So now we move on to the next. We see 4 plus 9, 13, 4 plus 10, 14, 4 plus 7, 11. Now we come to 4 plus 7, 11. We see that that has already been visited. So we can stop our execution here, and we can say that yes, there are two pairs that there are two pairs that sum up to the same number. So this is just another simple example of how you can see whether, if there is a defined range, whether you can create a hash table out of it, and you can use hashing to drastically improve your solution. So next, this is one more problem. Just read the problem statement once. I'll explain it after that. Yeah. So now let me explain. Just read through the problem statement once. I'll just explain it properly also. So again, I have to clear this. Oh well, why am I not able to improve? Oh, great. How do I increase the size? Sorry for that. So now, yeah. So this is, let's say, and we have an array of yeah, we have an array of chocolates. So let's say it is 5. Yeah, anyway, so we have an array of chocolates, and the thing is that you can so basically these are locations, and you can pick up all the chocolates from a particular location. But the catch is that you cannot choose adjacent locations. So if I, let's say I picked up from this location, I can pick up two chocolates at max. So I picked up all those two chocolates, but I cannot pick up chocolates from either this location or this location over here. So my main objective is to maximize the number of chocolates that I can grab, that I can buy. So the solution for that would be, you take five, then you take seven. Now you cannot. Why would you want? First of all, minus one shouldn't even be in this. If it's chocolate, it should only be positive numbers or whole numbers. So yeah, so I can't take one. Then I can take three, but if I take three, I won't be able to take 10. So I would rather skip three and I would go and choose 10. So my the maximum number of chocolates that I can take will be 5 plus 7 plus 10, which is equal to 22. Right. So now there are a lot of naive solutions for this over there. A lot of people, sometimes they even look for permutations and whatnot. They first find out all permutations, then they see if there are any adjacent elements, use recursion. But the simplest solution over here is to again use the concept of memorization. Just try to memorize whatever you can. And a lot of times, yeah, so one, before I give the solution for this, I also wanted to talk about the importance of dynamic programming in these interviews, because a lot of people had doubts on DP as well. So the thing about DP is that, so before you jump into DP, you should have you should have a very strong conceptual understanding of recursion. I will not, yeah, because only once you understand recursion properly can you understand what is exactly happening in the complex DB solutions. So this is, treat this as somewhat like an introduction to DB if you're not familiar with it, because dynamic programming is basically trying to reduce the time complexity by storing whatever information you can. So you improve the time complexity, but at the same time you're increasing your storage complexity, because you're storing results, whatever results you're getting intermediately. So we are going to use that concept. That's why I say this is like a very simple introduction to DB, because it's a single array question. So here, what the concept that we can use is that, so when you think about it, what actually matters for selecting an element over here, let's say whether I select three, is or let's say whether or not I select one, is to see whether if I select one, what is the maximum I can get, or if I don't select one, what is the maximum I can get. So that is what my problem statement essentially is when I'm going through each and every element to see whether I want to select it or not. So when I come to three, I need to make a decision whether I want to select three or not. What will that decision be based on? It will be based on, if I select three, will I get more? Or if I don't select three, will I get more? Now, if you select three, um, you cannot select one, right? So do not care about what we are going into the future, because that they will take care of their own. When I come to 10, that's when the logic of whether I choose 10 or not will happen. Three is completely independent of that. So over here, I only need to look back and I need to see, when I selected one, how many did I have? When I selected seven, how many do I have? Now, if I have selected seven, I can very easily select this location as well that has three. But if I have one, I cannot select this, which means that um, not choosing three, the only reason should be that by selecting this, I have a lot more than if I select three. So I'll do a run through and then maybe you'll understand more. So this is my array where I'm going to be storing my intermediate results. So the point of this array is at each location I will, so like this is my location number 0, 1. 2, 3, 4, and 5. At each location, I will see, once I have traversed to this location and I've seen the array, what is the maximum number of chocolates I have, right? Because I'm not interested in seeing which all locations I want. I just want to see what is the maximum number I can get. That also, the seeing every location also you can see from the array itself. I'll come to that later. So when I traverse over, so let's traverse the array one by one. So now I am at this element. What is the maximum number of chocolates I can have if I have just this? It is obviously 5, right? Now, if I come here and I select this, now what is the maximum number that I can have? I can either choose this location and miss out on selecting this location, or I can select the location or earlier and not select this location. So if I select the number that I can get, the maximum number till reach this point is 2. But if I don't select it, the maximum number that I can reach is 5, which we can see from this previous element itself. So this is 5. Now we take this element. Now we need to see whether we want to select this or not. Now we don't want, so if we don't select it, the maximum that we get is 5, whatever we have over here till this element, whatever evaluation we have done. So which is 5. But if we select this element, then we cannot select this element. We need to see what is the maximum for two elements before it and the addition of this. So we see this 5 plus 7 is 12, which is greater than this 5. So we can say that 12 is the maximum I can achieve till here. Now, when we take this element, we can either, we have to see the maximum of not selecting it, which is to see the element before it, which is 12 over here, or 5 plus 1, which is 6. Now, 12 is obviously greater than 6, so we input 12 over here. Now, when we come to this element, what are we going to see? We're going to see whether 12 is greater, which is not selecting 3, or whether this 12 plus 3, which is 15, is greater. So we take 15, that means we have selected 3. Now we come here, and for here, what do we have to check? We have to check whether not selecting it would be more beneficial or whether selecting it would be more beneficial. Not selecting it would mean that I would ideally select 3, because if I've selected this element, I would obviously want this. So for 3, we see that if we select 3, the maximum that we get is 15. But if we don't select 3 and we select 10, the maximum that we'll get is 12 plus 10, which is 22. And that is your answer. This final number is the maximum of these. This final number, basically, while we're selecting this, we'll see whether this is greater or this is greater. So this last number in your array is your final answer, which is 22. Right. Uh, So yeah, so this is how you can solve such a question. You can use memorization, and here you can see that you've just traversed the loop once. So it's an O of n solution. So some questions you can see whether you can break down, you can break down you. So the earlier example was breaking down the question into sub questions. Here you have to see if you can break down into a stepwise procedure. Like if you can approach the solution of the question in stepwise. So our first step was to see the maximum within the first two. Second step was to use this solution to see the max, and then use the next element to see the maximum among the first 3. Then the next step was to see the result of the first 3 and the next element to see the maximum among the first 4 elements. So what we are doing is we are going step in a stepwise manner, and we are making use of our results in the previous step. So that is one more way you can improve your code. So yeah, so now with that, we'll start the Q&A section. So if you have any kind of questions, any kind of doubts that are still remaining, anything that you want to ask, just feel free to ask. Hi. What sources or resources do you recommend? Um, so when I was preparing for interviews, I had only gone through CDCI and Geeks for Geeks. So CDCI is, there's this book called Cracking the Coding Interview. It has a good amount of questions, and the questions will help you build your concept in certain areas, because that's how the book is built. But that is not going to be enough. You can so once you have revised your concept, you can go there, you can see the questions, and without seeing the solution, it would be very beneficial for you if you can come up with the solutions and then have a look at the solution, to see what all you missed, because they've explained a particular question, the all different kinds of solutions for that. After that, I would recommend going through Geeks for Geeks archives, because there you are going to get um, very different questions, a completely different problem statement that does the exactly same thing that you have just learned. So that is going to be very helpful for you. So go to Geeks for Geeks and look up on the archives. And Additionally, there are all these weekly and monthly coding competitions that happen. So right now you can take part in them, do some questions online, just practice. So what that practice will happen, like Code Chef or HackerRank. So what that practice will do is it's going to make sure that when you're in an interview and you have to write actual code, you will not hesitate. So that is one thing that I would recommend. Another thing, shouldn't we? Oh, so this was earlier. I'll have a. I don't remember what I said now. I'll have a look at it, and this is kind of. How do I just get the chat? Yeah, this is easier. I don't have to see my face. Um, yeah. So shouldn't we look for a sum of 7 if we have chosen -1 as well? Yeah. So this I don't remember exactly what I said then. I'm sorry for not seeing this earlier. If you have any doubts on part of the solution, you can connect with me after this. I will help you understand more. Uh, Also, so this is like a Q&A section. So any kind of doubts that you have, I will help you in understanding. I'm also starting a weekend learning series. So the idea is that I will be posting videos explaining the basic concepts of basic things that you need for interviews, like linked list, trees, hashes, and graphs. And so there will be two parts. One module will be for just understanding the concept and basic coding, and one more module will be for solving questions using those concepts. So the idea is to have it like one video every week, every weekend. It's called weekend learning series. So the first video I should be posting today. So if you want to learn more about concepts, I suggest you can have a look at that. It'll be really I hope it'll be helpful to you. So now back to questions. How long before the interview is it ideal to prepare? So again, this is a variable based on person to person, based on how much coding experience you have before and how strong your concepts are. So right now you would have about a month and a half left to prepare, right? So I would suggest right now, just revise your there are two things. If you are starting completely from scratch, you should start immediately, because you need to cover a lot of your concepts, basic concepts, and understand them, revise them, and then do questions based on them. If you are a little well versed and you code frequently, I would suggest you can start about 2 to 3 weeks, at least 3 weeks before the interview process, because what that will do is that will give you enough time, because you will be taking breaks. I would suggest do it for at least 1 to 2 hours every day. Even if you want to do, if you even if you have something else on your agenda, if you can spend 1 hour every day, that should be good to at least give you a flow. So if you start 3 weeks earlier and do, let's say, an hour or two every day, revise your basic concepts, go topic by topic, pick up a topic, revise your concepts, code the basic questions. Like if you pick up linked list, just do not see any kind of code, revise your concepts and try to code linked list yourself, like inserting, deleting, displaying, traversing, just everything. You will make errors if you're doing it after a while. Fine, let it be. Try to debug those errors. Eventually you will come up with a solution. If you still struggle, then have a look at the code, see what you missed, and then fix that code. Don't copy paste that code or see that how okay ho gaya. Fix your code and get it running. So that will give you the confidence that when in an interview, whenever you are thrown with something unfamiliar, or even if you've been out of touch for, let's say, 2 3 days, it will give you the confidence that okay, hey, I have done this before, I know the concept, I have done the coding, I can do this again. So all you need to do before the interview is actually revise your concept. So that is what I would recommend, a method of preparing and when to prepare. Next, for the initial coding rounds, where should I prepare from? Yes, so the so all of this comes when you have done your only when you've reached the interview stage. Now, the initial rounds are obviously going to be MCQ based or online coding. So, I think for MCQs, there was a site called Geeks Quiz, geeksquiz.com. Let me just check. Yeah, I don't remember. But if you Google search for Geeks Quiz, you will find something like that, and you will find an archive of MCQ questions. So I would suggest, and it is categorized topic wise. So you can actually understand a topic, then go through the MCQs of that to strengthen your MCQs for the first round. For the coding, yes, you will require to code complete questions and a complete solution. So again, for that, as I said, just doing the concept and revising the concept is not enough. You need to see at least two questions. If let's say you are left with very less time and you can't do a lot, just do at least two questions that make use of that concept, and go just come up with the logic on your own, then code the solution and get a working code. So even though you have to spend a lot of time on that, it will give you the confidence to make sure that you can do this. And in these rounds, you will be able to debug easier because you will have gone through those kind of problems before. So that is why I strongly suggest practice coding on your laptop, and on your laptop for the initial rounds, and on paper for the interviews. So Geeks Quiz for MCQs, and you can go through go to any site like CodeChef, HackerRank, or Hacker Earth, SPOJ, or look up for questions on Geeks or Geeks archives for practicing these questions. So these can be good sources for you to practice. Next, how to identify states in a dynamic programming problem. Once we get the recurrence, how to think of a bottom-up solution. So again, from for dynamic programming, there are two parts. The first part is that you need to understand. For first of all, you need to have the naive solution very clearly in your head. Only once you have that solution in your head very clearly can you think of how to optimize this. Next, you will have to divide it into parts. What sections you can divide it into. Once you do that, you will have to see what can you store in the data itself. Like what part would be helpful that I can reuse once I visit one particular element. So once you come up with this thinking and you do the basic questions, right, you will train your brain to work in that direction. And that is where the practice comes in. But the main concept, the way I would advise you to think for every question, is to first have a naive solution clear in your head. Then second, how do I break down this question into subparts in a way that once I come to a particular part, I can reuse whatever I did in the earlier part. How do I come up with that? Because once you think of that, then you can know what information you can store to improve your efficiency. Once you know what information you can store, you can come up with what way you want to store that information in. and that can be pretty variable. It's not necessary that there's just one solution. Once you know what way you can store it in, you can come up with a DP solution for that. And once you have this thinking in place, then this is not enough. You need to do a lot of questions, because each question will have some twist or the other. Once you do those and apply this general thinking to those, it will help you in solving questions. And but to be honest, I wouldn't recommend giving too much of importance to dynamic programming for your campus interviews, because the interviewers very rarely ask TP questions for on-campus interviews. I would suggest strengthening your other concepts before, and only when you're thorough with those, you should invest time in this. Otherwise, you can spend a day or so in this just to revise. But unless you're thorough with everything else, I wouldn't recommend stepping too much of deep into this, because that will not help you for your on-campus placement interviews. Um, okay. Is it overkill to start competitive coding from the start of the second year, or can I get away with it by starting off later? So it is not overkill to start from the second year. I have been doing it from my first year. You get a little bored after a while, but that's fine. But you can actually, so it's not about getting away with it. I would say that if your aim is to crack these interviews, you should be up to date. Don't start completely from scratch. 2 months before your interview, because those 2 months is not going to give you enough time to build up your concept. It will be enough time to, let's say, go through everything once, but that is not the key part is to basically develop your concept. And once you have your concept in place, you will have your thinking set in that way, and you can code whatever comes. So the main point that you should work on developing is to have that kind of a mindset. Develop the concept, or develop an algorithmic thinking. That is what you should develop. Even if you don't practice everything, you don't know everything, that's fine. But even like solving puzzles would help you in that way. But if you actually start from the second year, that will be good. Just go to these monthly competitions, code like that are hosted on CodeChef and HackerRank. Attempt it initially, or like maybe the first or the second time out of the 10 questions you will be able to solve zero. That's fine. When the competition ends, look for solutions, see how people attempted it. Only look for the easy ones right now if you're just starting off. Like if you're in your second year, look for solutions. You'll understand how people attempt them, and how, like, what is the thinking that goes behind them. A lot of the times the solutions will be very similar. So if you know how the thinking was behind one problem, a similar question, your mind will automatically go in that direction. So once it goes in that direction, it will be easier to find your way from there. Once you have the general direction set, eventually you will improve. So it's just a matter of spending a day or two in a month. If you start that also, it will help you a lot. I would not recommend just doing everything before your interviews. Do a little, start building up the base, and then when it comes just before the interviews, you can go all out. Yeah. How would you recommend solving medium to hard questions on linked lists and trees? So again, for this, I would recommend you have your concept built very strong. So if even if, let's say, you haven't done it for like a week or so, and you want to start right now, okay, just revise the concept in your head. If you've completely forgotten the concept, read a little about the concept without reading the code. Okay, just understand the concept. Once you have the concept clear in your head, do a dry run of what you would do for basic operations, like insert after kth node, insert at beginning, insert at end, having a singly linked list, doubly linked list, all these things. Have the concept clear, and try to work out simple examples on pen and paper without writing the code. Once you do this, you will have the concept very clear. Next, code this entirely and have the working code. Now, why I'm emphasizing on doing these very simple aspects, the key aspects, is because it will help you in developing the concept. And once you have that concept etched in your brain, you can attempt any question from it. So once you have this concept done, then you look for archives on Geeks for Geeks, or yeah, that is actually the go-to place. Actually, Geeks for Geeks. Just look for archives over there on questions and see what questions have been asked in interviews. Pick up the easiest question first and solve it. Code the linked list again completely for the question or the tree, solve it completely. Next, pick up another easy question. Pick up only easy questions the first 3 4 times. The point of that is that again this will give you what direction to think in, and it will give you some confidence that you know that you can solve it. And once you do these 4 5 easy questions and you get the general direction, then I would say you move on to the medium questions, because then you will have the concept built, you know what direction to go in, you know how to approach the question. It's just a matter of, because now when you'll be attempting that, you won't be using your brain to do all this basic stuff. You have already trained your mind to do that basic stuff. The only thinking that you have to do now is of the question specific level. How do I attempt this? How do I go in from here? These are the basic things that I can use. How do I go from here? So that is one thing. So that is how you can improve. One more thing about graphs that I generally give an advice about. So whenever questions on graphs are asked, right, it is hidden in a way that you wouldn't even know. So one question that I had come across was something like this: you are given a dictionary of elements, a dictionary of words, and you want, so let's say I have words like ABC, ABF, and AGJ, whatever. So I want to see that from, just actually let me change it: ABC, ABF, and ACF, right? So now, and my point is that I want to see that if I change just one letter from a word, can I somehow, by changing one letter at a time, can I reach another word? So let me share my screen for that. Mm, oh yeah, clean it again. Yeah. So let's say my first element is ABC, my next element is ABF, and my next element is ACF. I want to see that if from ABC, this is my complete dictionary right now. I know dictionary is not this small, but this is just my dictionary of 3 elements. I want to see that from ABC, can I somehow change one letter and come to ACF? In this dictionary, it's possible because I can do ABC to ABF, then I can change, so this I change C to F, then here I can change B to C, and I can come to ACF, and I can see that throughout my path, all 3 elements ABC, ABF, and ACF were in this dictionary. So I want to see if it's possible to do this. Now, this is actually a graph question that does not strike people. There are other variations of this also, but the point of such questions is that you want to see if you can, in where you have a finite set that's given, and you want to see that if you can traverse through states. Another permutation of this question is a number lock. I want to, how many tries does it take to come to the correct number lock? If I have a, like for example, one more question that I came across was, there's a thief who was caught, and he had a list of number locks, and he has a safe. We need to try all number locks, but then again they can only be changed, and we want to see if how many, like what is the fastest we can get there. So whenever we have such a finite, my point is, whenever we have such a finite list of elements, and we want to traverse through some kind of states, this can be taken as one state, this is another state, this is another state. whenever you want to traverse through finite states and you want to see if we can reach one particular state from another given a finite list of elements, it is usually a graph question. How is this a graph question? You can have all the elements there. Uh, so each word in my dictionary is actually a node, and they will be connected. If like from here I can see that ABC to ABF is possible, so they will be connected. Here this is connected. If let's say I had BBC, right, that would be connected to only this. So you can have such a graph that is connected, and then all you need to do is you need to do a BFS to see if this and this is connected. That's all. So the point is that once you do these questions, so like this thing about whenever it's migrating from states and we have a finite list, it is usually a graph question. These things you will develop once you practice those questions after you have the concept clear. You will come up with such trends for each type of a question, which will help you in the interview process. Um, So, are there any other questions that are coming? Um, oh yeah, one more thing that I forgot. Yeah, some other people had questions about company-specific processes. So, in general, all companies, what they're going to do is they're going to have and the first round is going to be an online test that's going to either be a part one MCQ and part two coding, one test, or some companies they even do first test as MCQ and second test as coding after they filter out from the first test. So that is another way that companies go. So this is in general what happens initially. There's an online test. After that, usually companies have a group discussion round. In the group discussion round, you are put into a room with people, and everyone is given the same question. You're given a time limit, let's say half an hour or 1 hour, and then you are gonna what you're gonna come up with the solution and call someone and show them your solution, explain the code. After that, you have technical interviews, and then some companies have a managerial or an HR interview. Specifically, for Microsoft, when they come to Manipal, the first round is an MCQ. Then they have an online test where you have to code. Then there's a GD. Then a technical interview and an HR interview. This is the Microsoft process. For Amazon, you have an online test in which MCQs and the coding is combined. You have, I think, 20 MCQs and 2 coding questions. And based on that, you are shortlisted for the interviews. In interviews, you have just 2 technical interviews for Amazon. And based on that, you are given an internship. For a placement, if you are selected for the internship, then you might have a round with someone who's called a bar raiser for getting a placement offer as well. But that is if a bar raiser is come. I'm not sure whether they come to Manipal right now or not. Um, Other company specific processes, I am not completely sure of the exact process, but the general trend, as I mentioned, is online test, GD, technical interview, managerial or HR interview. This is the general flow that goes through. Yeah, so okay, there are some more questions. What should a very good resume contain? What are the bonus points of a resume? What does an interviewer look for in a resume? Okay, so in a resume, first of all, the way I have my resume, I start with a very small section about my educational qualifications, 10th, 12th, and graduation, whatever my CGPA is. I do not mention stuff like objective and nonsense. Just it should be very precise. The interviewer should like have a glance, look for 30 seconds, and get everything that they want from the resume. That is what the resume should be when you are giving it to an interviewer. in a face-to-face interview. When you're sending your resume for online applications, I would suggest having a bigger resume. But yeah, the general contents would be the same. So for a face to face, so I'll give exact the elements for both. First, a face to face interview. General stuff about your academics. What is your CGPA? What how much did you get in 12th? And if you want to mention any key subjects or electives that you've taken, you can mention that so that the interviewer knows that you're familiar with those, like that technology stack. I also mentioned what all languages I've coded in and what all frameworks I've used. That is one more thing that I mentioned. Just one line about that. Um, After that, you should mention what all projects you have done. Projects are important because it gives an idea to the interviewer about what kind of stuff you've worked on before. So projects will be one place. Even if they are college projects, it's okay to list it there. Projects is one place. Then if you have, and this project can be anything from college specific courses or preferably open source work. That will be something that will be that will be it. So basically projects. Then you can have a section for your internships, wherein you mention if you have interned before, what all you interned on, like where you interned, the title, and just a one line about the internship, like what exactly did you work on and what frameworks did you use, because then the interviewer is going to know what impact your project had and what exact languages or frameworks did you work on in that project or internship. So that is one more thing that you can include. Next, you can also have a section for your leadership that portray any kind of leadership skills, like I was organizer in Tech Tatwa, or I was a part of this club, or I helped organize this workshop, things like this. And then one more section that can have comparative coding. It's up to you how you want to organize these sections and what you want to include in each section, because there is no fixed format for a resume. It should be tailor made to what portrays yourself best to the interviewer. So these are the sections for a face-to-face interview. For sharing on an online platform. So for a face-to-face interview, I have just a strict one-page resume. For an online platform, I have like a 2.5 page resume that's slightly more colored and has a one-line aim about myself. And along with the projects, I've listed the projects, exactly what I've done in the projects, a little more in detail. Like instead of one line, I have like a paragraph of 3 to 4 lines. Then in my internships also, what internship I did, where I worked, what were my responsibilities, what was the impact of my project in my internship, and same with all my leadership skills. Like if I was, let's say, the if I was the what was I, the coordinator of, let's say, Cryptos, then I give the impact that, let's say, I was like, there were so many events under me, so many organizers who were working with so many volunteers, and there was so much of participation, because that gives people an idea of how, like, what kind of things you have experience handling. So these are some things that people will look out for in a resume. Basically it'll, and if you want like a general stuff, look for like peaks. So everyone does some stuff in college. Like everyone has a CGP, everyone has taken electives. Most of the people, like they do some kind of volunteering work. You Any kind of a peak achievement would also be helpful, that stands out from other people's. Like instead, like if other people have we attended a workshop, your aim should be including I conducted a workshop in my resume, because that will be something that will stand out and it will come out as like a peak point. So like attending workshop, conducted workshop, attending workshop. So such peaks, I you can go ahead and put it in bold also in your resume. I also do that. If I have any kind of prestigious coding competition I've taken part in, I highlight it in bold in my resume. It's completely fine. So go for peaks to showcase your best ability in your resume. Next, how much of priority should be given to OOP, OS, DBS, etc. preparation. So now this varies. So your data structures and object oriented programming concepts should be very clear for any interview. There is no excuse for that, because you will be using that extensively. Sometimes interviewers will be asking you to use a better structure. In that case, you will have to use classes, and your OOP like your data structures, you will have to know very well in order to answer those questions. Um, and your OOP will be very helpful in answering MCQ based questions as well. So these two concepts is very important for any interview. Other concepts like operating systems and DBMS is variable. It depends on the interviewer and the company that you're interviewing for. Um, if a company is so for example, if let's say a company who specializes in networks comes and you are interviewing for them, you should definitely revise your computer networks course. Even though how horrible it is, I hate that subject, but you should, if you are interviewing for them, you should have your concepts clear, because essentially they are a network based company. Similarly, if you are, let's say, interviewing for a database, primarily database heavy company, you know that they're going to be dealing with a lot of database in their day to day. So the interviewers will be more familiar with DBMS than with other concepts. So they are more likely to ask you DBMS. So in that case, you should be well versed with DBMS concepts. Sometimes it's also variable based on the interviewer, what the interviewer is comfortable with, but there's nothing you can do about it. There's some element of luck that is definitely involved. You just have to let luck do its thing, but you have to be as well prepared as you can. So operating systems is also something that interviewers want to ask. So specifically, the interviews that I have been in, so like the companies like Microsoft and Amazon, they wouldn't ask, they're not going to be asking operating systems. Most probably, Amazon is definitely not. Amazon is not definitely not going to ask any kind of DBMS or OS. Um, Microsoft, some people did ask DBMS questions. I don't think anyone asked OS, but other companies, they do ask DBMS and OS as well. So it depends on what company you are preparing for. Look for archives and see the relevance. Like so people have posted their interview experience. A lot of people have posted their interview experience on Geeks for Geeks. If you go through that, you can see exactly for each company what are the heavy points that people are looking for, and you have to be smart that way in preparing for a specific company. Do so during your vacations right now. Do a general preparation. Closer to the date, before each company comes, do a company specific preparation by going through the archives and seeing exactly what are the key points that the company is looking for. Next, what kind of questions come in the MCQs? So these will be very conceptualized based questions. So for example, things like they'll give you a code snippet. What will be the output of this? Or things like basic things like I don't know, maybe about like they give you a conceptual question, and like for example, they ask you what would you use to allocate memory for 100 elements in a row or something like that. So they'll give you four options, one with malloc or whatever, and then you'll have to select the right option for that. So all these will be conceptualized questions, or some theory, some output based questions, some fill in the blank also, like they give you a code snippet. What would you fill in here with four options that would result in the output being so and so? That is another way. These kind of questions is what the MCQs would be. Next, what is more important, the online interview questions to be practiced or working more on improving our resume? So there has to be a right balance. Too much of one thing is not going to be correct. If you only practice interview questions and you get to the interview, but you are not able to showcase something, it won't be that much. That being said, right now for campus interviews, um, not having too many projects on your resume is fine. um, what is going to be taken as a priority for on-campus interviews is your interview experience. That's pretty much it. Projects matter. They help in creating an impression on the interviewer, but not that much. Whatever you answer in the interviews is going to matter for on-campus interviews. For off-campus interviews, it is the complete reversal. What you have worked on previously, your projects, how strong your resume is, will matter way more in shortlisting and during the interview process. During the interview process, you will still have to answer questions, but even if you're not able to, but you get the concept right and you have the right projects in your resume, you will still make it through. That will not happen in a non-campus interview. So again, it matters what you are focusing on. If you want to focus on-campus interviews, I would say focus more on preparing for the interview. If you want to apply for off-campus, if you want to apply for companies off-campus, I would say work on building your resume. But at the same time, don't just completely neglect the interview. Do it parallelly, but you can give more priority to building your resume. So, any more questions? Does anyone have any more questions? Um, you can post in the chat. So I think that is it. Um, I hope this has been helpful for you people. Once again, a reminder, I will be starting a weekend learning series starting today to help with basic concepts and some questions for interviews. So if you want, you can see that and give some suggestions on how to make it more helpful. If you have any more questions, you can reach out to me offline via any kind of social media. You can comment over here. You can reach out on Facebook, on WhatsApp, any kind of a place where you want. If you have any other questions, I will be happy to help you. And yeah, I hope this session was helpful for you. Thank you, guys.